I would be hard-pressed to name two manga that are half as beloved around the world as Kentaro Miura's Berserk, and I think I'd have just as difficult a time finding anybody who thought that Berserk was perfect. First couple volumes aren't really that great. There's plenty of stuff in the Golden Age arc, the most beloved arc of the manga, that didn't necessarily need to be there, and that the adaptations were fine not to cover. Lots of people don't even really like it that much in the arcs that follow the Golden Age arc. Each one is contentious for its own reasons, but also beloved for its own reasons. And none of that has stopped it from still being recognized as one of the greatest manga of all time by many, many people. What we love about Berserk is that it is impressive. The artwork seems impossibly detailed. There are so many images in this that will stay in your mind forever, for better or for worse. And the epic storytelling, the way that these characters are constructed, the psychology of Guts and Griffith, and the memorability of the moments that are created between them, that is the lifeblood of why people love Berserk. And the series has now been left without an ending because Kentaro Miura passed away. And it might be fair enough that it has no ending, because I don't know that there could have been an ending which would have satisfied even the majority of readers at this point. But the most important thing about Berserk is that only Kentaro Miura could have ever created it. Let's take a look at another manga that I really love, Nazca of the Valley of the Wind, drawn by Hayao Miyazaki throughout the 80s. This artwork is also unbelievably detailed, the storytelling epic, the character arcs amazing. But it's fundamentally different from Berserk, and Hayao Miyazaki could not have created Berserk, just like Kentaro Miura could not have created Nazca of the Valley of the Wind. It's impossible to say that one or the other is better. In fact, it's impossible to say that everybody should like either of these manga. And here is another manga that I've considered a favorite of mine, Girlfriends. This manga is not impressive in its incredibly detailed artwork because it doesn't have that. It doesn't tell an epic story. It does have some great character arcs, but ultimately the appeal of this manga for me when I read it was very personal. It was the fact of the existence of a great lesbian romance in manga that I had never really seen the like of before when this published that made me love it so much. And in the same way that that only mattered to me because of who I am, Berserk only matters to anyone because of who they are. It's not something you automatically love because it's good. You love it because it means something to you. And this is always the case. Anything you love, it's because of what it means to you. Around 4 years ago, I made a video called We Have Accepted Mediocrity. It was a long, unscripted rant, beautifully edited by my former editor, Devu, that resonated with a lot of people because I was decrying the seeming downfall of anime and YouTube. Two mediums that I had come to for personal connection many times and felt that I wasn't getting as much personal connection as I used to from them. And I blamed that on trends in the industry that are perpetuated by people allowing them to exist. They were both mediums which were failing to impress me in the ways that they once had. But at that time, I was still struggling to figure out what I actually liked in those mediums to begin with. On YouTube, I was impressed with people who were able to do things that I felt I should be capable of. Making long-form, narratively driven, high-effort videos that made an interesting point. And I wanted to go in the direction of making more things like that. I made that video as a precursor to the idea that I was going to spend my time making bigger, more complex, higher-effort YouTube videos involving more people. And in the long run, the wall that I ran up against was that I couldn't do that. And at first I blamed the changing nature of YouTube itself, that it was harder and harder to spend a long time making a video, that I would be more rewarded by putting less effort in. But when I came up with these lofty ideas of projects that I wanted to work on and then started towards the goal of having them done, I quickly realized the problem wasn't that anybody else wasn't allowing me to do these things. It was that I couldn't do them. I had images in my head of something I was supposedly capable of, theoretically capable of, but in practice couldn't figure out how to make real. And most of us have experienced this. If you're any kind of artist, chances are you've never quite made something that lives up to what you think you should be able to do, or what you've seen others do. But your basis of why you find those things that you want to be able to do impressive are completely yours. You want this or that ability because you see value in that ability. But this world is not asking you to impress yourself. It's asking you to impress it. People want you to do the thing that they want to see you do. And you can cry and scream about the fact that people don't want you to do the thing that you most want to do, but the fact of the matter is, just because you can do something and can impress yourself doesn't mean anybody else has any reason to be impressed with it. And if you find that you can't actually do it, well, maybe you shouldn't try so hard. I've talked before about how one of the most sobering realizations I've had as an anime fan was in realizing that there will never be another Satoshi Kon film because Satoshi Kon died and took with him the ability to make a Satoshi Kon film. For more than a decade following his death, Masao Maruyama was trying to find a director who could finish his last movie, The Dreaming Machine, and he could not find someone. There was no one who could do what Satoshi Kon did, because he was the only one. Everything he did was uniquely innate to the way that he looked at the world. I learned something similar when Rick and Morty was going into its third season, and the reason it took so incredibly long for that season to get made was because Justin Roiland, the main creative mind behind the show, was doing so much work on it, and so few people were capable of really capturing what he was bringing to the table that it wasn't possible for it to be done faster. And even still, some of the best people that were working on the second season were bought out by Disney, and they no longer had them on the crew because Disney could afford to pay those talented people more than Adult Swim could afford to pay them to continue working on Rick and Morty. And ultimately, they wouldn't have to pay those people to keep Rick and Morty as popular as it was. They didn't need to increase the budget to increase the profit margins because the show was already popular enough that it would be a self-perpetuating engine of its own success. Enough people were going to be impressed enough with what the show was still doing that it didn't need to do everything it was capable of in the first place. And I could see this as a sad fact, but for the people who were leaving the show to go work for Disney, it meant a better life for them. And what I think the YouTube and anime industries were seeking that I was failing to see is just a better life for themselves. Yes, YouTube will encourage you to put in less effort and to make a more rudimentary type of content, but the reason that people will do that, the reason people didn't feel like they should keep trying to make something that goes beyond that is because they were trying to make their own lives better, and I cannot blame anybody for that. There is no reason that people should have been trying to impress specifically me with the way that they do things if that wasn't going to make their lives better. The anime industry was in a period of massive upheaval throughout the 2010s because the entire way that the world functions has been changing constantly, and finding your footing in that is really difficult. Nobody was out there trying to make something more mediocre. They were trying to make something more livable. They were trying to find a way that they could keep working in an industry that they cared about without losing their life over it. If we as audience members are struggling to find works that we connect with, it might be because we don't know what we're really looking for. And I think that I suffered this problem more than anything else in my anime fandom up until recently. It took me such a long time to figure out what was the common thread between all of the shows that I really loved above everything else. I would watch every anime that came out every year in search of the things that I thought were going to be truly great. And even still, there were plenty of things that other people considered to be just the very best of what was coming out that I thought completely sucked, and stuff that I thought was the very best that other people thought completely sucked. Who am I to say that things are becoming more mediocre because they are less to my taste? And moreover, why would it even matter so much? Why does it matter if there's not as much stuff that appeals to me? I think it comes down to identity affirmation. We are coming to media to be impressed, but the only thing that's going to impress us is something that we recognize as impressive, and our ability to recognize something is couched in our experiences. When I first started watching anime in 2001, the appeal to me had a lot to do with the structure of how anime was being presented to Americans at the time. I happened to grow up reading magazines as my number one mode of entertainment. I loved magazines as a kid, and so I was introduced to anime through a magazine called Anime Invasion. I read all kinds of stuff about all kinds of shows that I knew nothing about because I was engaged with the format and with the idea that I was on the ground floor of this new thing from my perspective, considering that I was holding like the first mainstream anime magazine to come out in the United States, and watching Adult Swim right when it kicked off, which was a deliberate block of just Japanese cartoons aimed at a slightly older audience being broadcast once a week. But what allowed me to really connect with anime was Inuyasha and Rurouni Kenshin coming to air on Cartoon Network, because these were shows about long-haired guys kicking ass. I grew up looking like a little girl and having a real difficult time connecting with the ways that boys were portrayed in media. I saw myself as supposedly a boy because I had been born with those genitalia, and I really resisted the idea that I was somehow necessarily a girl because of the fact that I didn't want to look more or act more like the way that other boys were acting. So for me, getting to see characters who looked like prospectively what I might grow up to look like, and who were heroic and kicked ass and were cool, made me think, okay, yeah, I can finally embrace myself because I see myself reflected in this media. And I was interested in a lot more anime than just those ones that I considered favorites and that I connected with that strongly. There were many different points of connection. When it came to the reasons that I was so compelled by anime and manga, it was things like reading Naruto and all of the characters being my age and very shrimpy and small like I was, and seeing a character like Haku who was supposedly a boy but looks like a girl to everyone and still kicks ass. Those were the things that made me emotionally involved in this thing, beyond what I could recognize at the time. In recent years, Demon Slayer has become the most popular anime franchise around, and I really struggled to understand it for a while because I don't connect with it that strongly. And I could say that it's because, oh well, it's generic, or it's not visually appealing to me, or this or that reason, but anything I could complain about with Demon Slayer, I could also say about stuff that I legitimately love and would continue to return to. The real reason that I don't like Demon Slayer is I don't connect with the characters. I don't see myself in Tanjiro. And after talking to lots of fans of the series and asking them what they think the appeal of the show is, the biggest response I've gotten is that people love Tanjiro. They see themselves in this character. They see him as an aspirational version of their own self-image, in the same way that a lot of kids from my generation did with Goku. And I grew up not connecting to Goku at all because I didn't want to grow up to be a big, muscular, cool, badass guy. I wanted to be a long-haired, shrimpy swordsman. Now, anime has never been the only thing that I connect with. I've been huge into music since I was 14. I've played a lot of video games since around that same time. And of course, I've spent tons and tons of time on the internet, not just on YouTube, but in all sorts of communities, finding people that I connected with enough that I could gain something from the communication. And when I got really heavily into anime again in 2014 in order to start talking about it in YouTube videos, it really was a struggle to figure out, why do I like anime? What is it that is drawing me to it, that is making me pick the favorite shows that I pick? And the conclusion I finally come to is that I really appreciate shows about how different people affect each other. As many as possible, in fact. If you were to line up a bunch of my favorite anime, such as Shirobako, Log Horizon, the Chimera Ant arc in particular of Hunter x Hunter, and Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, that show codifies in that phrase, standalone complex, what I am looking for in anime. The complex set of interactions between standalone parts. Neon Genesis Evangelion and K-On! Are two anime that I have, at various points, described as my all-time favorite. Evangelion is about the realization that you need to participate in the complex web of interactions in order to progress as a person. K-On! Similarly is about how having a group of friends will bring out the best in you. And these shows actually are more simplistic in their approach. I consider them sort of opening the door towards the realizations of, say, Sangatsu no Lion, which I've also considered to be potentially my favorite anime, because it goes much more in depth of pushing a Shinji-like character into the world and creating those fractals of engagement. Shirobako or Log Horizon then is the fully matured adult form of characters who already understand that they need to be in that system, who are already deeply ingrained in it, and we are just watching all of the chips fall. Now, I love plenty of anime that aren't at the core about how a large community of people interacts with each other. But when it comes to the difference between something that I give a 9 out of 10 because I think it is so technically masterful and also appealing to me, and something that I give a 10 out of 10 because it is so specifically appealing to me that I can't even imagine life without it anymore, that is the difference. Anime does not owe me the existence of shows that I would give a 10 out of 10 to. The existence of those shows has helped me a lot in my life in being able to recognize and like myself and what I sort of bring to the table as a human being. But if I've ever been angry, and I have been, about there not being more anime that appealed to me in that personal way, it's because I felt the need for more affirmation. I needed there to be more shows that tell me something about myself because I feel incomplete. I feel that I'm still waiting for that answer to come. And now that I have that answer, I don't feel that need anymore. I am not desperate for a new anime to come out that tells me something about myself because I think I get it now. When I was in a place where I felt like anime and YouTube were the only places I'd ever found personal connection, and I was still desperate to find more of that personal connection because I didn't feel fulfilled in life or as a person, then yes, it made me very angry that there was so much stuff being made that I couldn't connect with, that other people seemed to be praising and okay with, and it left me feeling like, if this is the direction things go in, I'm gonna be left behind. But now I've come to realize that if I don't want to be left behind, the best way for me to catch up is to engage with that stuff, to decide to figure out what is appealing about it to other people so that I can relate to other people. Communication is always a two-way street after all. I spent a lot of my youth waiting for someone to come up to me and say, I get you. Now it's my turn to go out and figure out how I can get other people, tell them that I get them, and then maybe they'll want to try and understand me too. Once I start asking questions, they'll start asking questions back. When you've done something for someone, they're more likely to do something for you. I once had a video called You Do Not Have Time, in which I expressed that you shouldn't waste any time at all on things that you don't like, because you've only got so much time in the world to actually consume the things you do like, to actually find your happiness. But I think a mature and self-assured person can find their happiness wherever they are. They can find a reason to be engaged, a reason to be involved. After all, love is not about finding something that reflects you and allows you to love yourself. Loving something is about trying to understand it. It's about deciding that in spite of whatever flaws it may have or whatever ways that it doesn't agree with your sensibilities, you're going to try to understand it anyways. You're going to make an effort because you want to know more about that thing or that person. This anime season, I have been watching all sorts of shows, and I've been loving my experience with them. I've been watching shows I would have definitely dropped after the first episode, such as Takt Op Destiny, or even Komi Can't Communicate. And I don't love Takt Op Destiny as a show. I think it's really mediocre, but I'm also not angry at it. I'm not upset with its mediocrity. I'm interested in it. I'm interested in what is appealing about it, why it would still reach some people in spite of those mediocre elements. I'm willing to put aside the immediate reactions that I have and give it thought, try to like it as best I can. Of course, there is still incredibly cynical media being made. The Cowboy Bebop live-action adaptation that I'm going to have to talk about at length pretty soon, I think is very cynically made. I think it may have even been designed specifically to make a lot of people mad. Do I think everybody who sees it is going to hate it? No, I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it, and I want to talk about why that's possible too. But my intrigue in the show isn't in the fact that it makes me angry or that it makes other people happy. It's in studying its existence and why we have those reactions. I don't think anybody necessarily needs to task themselves with figuring out why everything is good or why anybody likes whatever they do. I think most of us are coming to media because of the fact that we want that reaffirmation. We want something that's going to put us back on the track towards being ourselves or whoever we want to be. It is not easy to do that. We live in a deeply complicated, deeply difficult world that only gets worse every single day. The vast majority of people who are consuming media are doing it just so that they can stop thinking about reality for a while and reinforce their ability to deal with that reality without having to really face consequences in it. And the better you can understand why people are choosing the media that they choose, the better you can understand people, the better relationships you can have with those people, and the more love you can foster with them. Many of us don't love ourselves enough to start loving other people. And I think that described me when I made We Have Accepted Mediocrity. The problem was not anything but me. The problem was I needed the reaffirmation, and I wasn't getting it. 4 years hence, I have figured out what I'm looking for. I understand myself well enough to know how I can entertain myself, how I can be happy with myself. And I'm challenging myself to put myself in the position of not always being happy, not always seeking out to be reified. Because I understand the value in engaging with other people's interests so that I can evolve myself. The more I understand about the world outside my own head, the better I can evolve the situation inside my head to deal with that world. Have we accepted mediocrity? Yes, we accepted it from the beginning. Mediocrity was always fine. No one is looking for greatness. They're looking for themselves. What I'm concerned about is that we may have forgotten love. That we are so ready to be angry about things not being the way that we think they should be, that we're forgetting to investigate why things are the way they are. Engaging stuff on its own terms, figuring out who the other person is and why they think the way they do so that we can live with them instead of wishing they would just go away. Because they're not going to go away. The stuff you don't like, the trends that you see evolving that you think are problematic are going to keep happening unless you can engage with them and figure out why they're happening and convince people to do something else. And that's never going to happen through a lack of love. It's never going to happen through war. I am no longer at war with mediocrity. I am in love with love. I strive to remember love every day, and I hope that you will too. Next time you get mad at a piece of media for existing, or at somebody else for liking something that you think is bad, ask yourself, why would this make me angry? And if you don't have the energy to engage in a conversation about your differences or try to come to an understanding, figure out, first and foremost, how you can get that energy. Just because you can't find a wave to surf doesn't mean you need to fight the ocean to try to make one appear. Just wait. Sit. Be calm. Be with yourself. If you can't be with yourself, maybe you shouldn't be on a surfboard. This metaphor is breaking down. Now, it's been nearly a year since I unlisted a huge amount of the videos that were on my channel. In the time since then, I've relisted a bulk of those. There are some that won't come back, such as We Have Accepted Mediocrity, because, well, it's archived in other places, but more importantly, I don't believe in it anymore. I think a lot of what I said in that video was just wrong, and a lot more of it is not a sentiment I would care to express anymore. A lot of people seem to have thought that I had stopped making anime videos entirely. That never happened. I've still been making anime videos this whole time. YouTube stopped showing stuff to my subscribers a while ago, and now every time I put out a video, there's a bunch of comments from people discovering that I have been making anime content. In fact, I have a whole series called Anime Alphabet in which I celebrate classic shows at great length, going back through their whole history and talking about why they appeal to people. Not all of these are shows that I personally love. Some of them I just am trying to figure out what is appealing about them. And maybe I don't completely get the full picture because they're not necessarily my shows. But I'm always in the process of trying to get closer and closer to understanding what has made anime special for so many people for so long. And in celebrating that, inspiring more people to figure out what they're trying to do with their own art. What are you trying to say about yourself? Who are you trying to reach? What do you want to affect in the world? These are the important questions to ask when you go about creating. I've been Trixie the Golden Witch. You can find more of my writing on goldenwitch.substack.com. I write all kinds of articles that don't become videos on there. And if you subscribe, you even get bonus articles and podcasts. I also still have a Patreon, and you can find every way to support me down in the links below. I also have a music channel called Branches of Yig, where every week there's 2 videos coming out where I either review albums, interview artists, and post my own music. YouTube definitely doesn't show any of those videos to any of the subscribers, so we're really trying to revive that channel by talking about lots of popular albums on there and allowing it to be searchable. So please check that out. Help me out. I'd like to be back where I was when I made We Have Accepted Mediocrity, but by means of remembering love. Always remember to never forget, anime forever.